we left the interface with the University of Iowa a long time ago because I wasn't getting acknowledged as understanding what was going on. And, as a healthcare professional myself, it really irks me, to be quite frank. Mm-hmm. And I think even in since we had the interface since December of 19, basically back to the university because of the complexity of what was happening, my biggest two things is that they didn't listen to what I had to say, and they would not acknowledge that his care depended on my being able to interpret for him what was happening to him, because they made a lot of assumptions that just weren't there and didn't bother to contact me. And I know, because of COVID, it was convenient to kick me out, so I'm not just his parent. At that point, should have been his medical advocate and was actually. But I think I would like docs to know this complexity. It's not, that families who come in with complex kids, it's not just the healthcare. It's everything else that surrounds the healthcare, and particularly when they become an adult. The idea that you have to have guardianship, and then to find out that we didn't have guardianship. We did have guardianship, but that I couldn't make end of life decisions because Iowa had changed the rules and nobody had notified us. I think those kinds of things. And I think sometimes it's for me, it's a matter of how you ask the questions. You can tell me, or you can ask my input, and you can give me 2 or 3 options of which direction we want to go, and let Jeff and I decide what's best for Jeff. In the end, that's what it came down to, Judy. And the quality of life, which was a huge import to us, was gone. And I remember being at the hospital one time, and the guy said, well, I thought you wanted him back to baseline. And I remember asking him, and did you ever ask me what baseline was? I didn't see any policy change. I didn't see them be more open about acknowledging that people with disabilities needs to have an advocate with them, particularly if they're unable to verbalize and, the level of care. Jeff's a great kid. He was, we were able to get a lot of things done for him. A lot of the things that you had talked about. We were able to have him be part of this community. We were able to work with the community to get a house built that he could live with roommates. And, that's sort of his legacy going on. We now move somebody else in who is medically fragile and things, but they get an opportunity to live life. And honestly, Judy, that's what Frank and I wanted for him. We wanted him to be able to, it's why we worked so hard to pull everything together. And I think healthcare was probably one of the hardest things we had to do, because there is no coordination. And your primary people don't typically have a knowledge base. Can you see it, Judy?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So this is one of the times we were in, obviously trying to sort out what was going on. And the most interesting thing about Jeff is we always, even though he was categorized severe and profound, we really felt that he receptively understood a ton. And we always treated him as if he was an adult and not as a child. And he used to get irritated when his roommate liked to listen to preschool things and he hated it. He did the same thing with his sister. So we certainly had our fair share with the MCOs. I probably got more out of the MCOs than a lot of people because, so I pretty much have learned systems. And so I can read policy stuff. So I wouldn't consider myself a policy wonk, but I can read it well enough to understand. And so I know when we were having difficulty when United Healthcare was with us, I just went right back to the document the state sent to the feds and said, under the waiver, this is what is supposed to be happening. So let's make it happen. And then I had enough connections because of the work I do in the community to get my legislator involved. And that's what it took. When Jeff was growing up, Judy, this is very true. We wanted to take a break. We needed a break. And his family wanted us to go down to Disney. Our daughter at that time was 3 or 3.5. And it wasn't going to be possible to take Jeff. I just, by that time he was 12 and it was just hard on everybody's thing. And so but we felt like we had to have nursing because of his seizures at nighttime. We could work with the rest of the unskilled care during the day, but, we really wanted somebody at night that was a nurse. In order for us to get 10 days of nursing, we had to have it for 6 months. Well, after I'd had it for 6 months, it's kind of like, gosh, I kind of like sleeping. kind of nice. But I remember having to argue that point on the phone. And the problem, what happened is every time the case came to a new person at DHS, it came to a new person at DHS who didn't have the history in the background. If they would go back and assign our really complex kids to a case person who could look back on the history and have the history there, or somehow write a summary of the history to go forward with when they left, St. Louis Children's Hospital never told us that he wouldn't do anything. At the University of Iowa, we were basically told, take him home. Don't do it. We don't know. He probably won't do anything. You don't know if we can ever get seizure control. We took him down to St. Louis because we wanted to try ACTH. He had infantile spasms as a baby. And Edwin Dotson, who ended up being the head of the Epilepsy Foundation at one point in time, and, pretty high up in the national level of epilepsy, basically turned to us and said, I don't know what he'll do. We don't know what he'll do, but what you put into him is going to make a lot of difference in what he does. And he says, I will never tell you. And that's the difference. That's that difference between making the assumption based on the physical signs that you see and, giving the child the potential, or giving the adult the potential if you can't talk, because Jeff had a very distinct way of telling us what he liked and didn't like, even though he had no verbal speech at all. And in that same statement, you just acknowledged the person and the parent as the expert on themselves.